Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Hello, listeners of the Global Marketing Show. I am so happy to welcome you here today. And I don't think to mention it often because I think it's covered in the intro and the extra, but did you know that we are sponsored by Rapport International? And the marketing team at Rapport International is fantastic. They put out tidbits almost every day on social media. So if you follow Rapport International or me, Wendy Pease, you can get these tidbits and they're hysterical. So I want to give you an example of one. There's a word called cwtch. It rhymes with butch, and it's a Welsh word that's for a special cuddle or an emotionally significant hug. And it conveys warmth, safety, and a sense of home to the one receiving it. Now, we have the word hug in the United States, but we don't have something that really pulls that in. So that's why language is so exciting to me, because you've got these words in other languages that we can take into the United States and they'll catch the emotional meaning behind it. All right, so speaking of emotion, golf can be a very emotional sport. And today we're going to talk to somebody who has a very global viewpoint. He says global is his life, literally. He grew up and was educated in France and in the UK. He's living in the US right now. His family has links to Japan. He's worked in the UK, the US, Malaysia, and his jobs have taken him all over the world in addition to working in those places. He really appreciates and understands cultural differences. He's had to with what success he's had at different businesses. And he really has a consumer-centric approach with global marketing. And that's enabled him to deliver innovative, award-winning products from concept through commercialization in all continents. He's currently, here's the golf connection, the global director of sourcing for golf at Wilson. So Jean-Pierre Degembe, welcome to the Global Marketing Show.
Good afternoon, Wendy. Thank you very much.
So let's start out with a little bit about golf around the world. Where is it played and what are the differences that one might see?
Well, it's played around the world, that's for sure. There's 66 million golfers around the world. And the rules of the games are pretty much the same around the world. Now, the game has totally different kind of connotations or habit depending you are. In the USA, you have what we call the six-pack game, which is a bunch of buddies who goes on the weekend and they play around, and whatever is the score doesn't matter as long as they got six-pack done by the front nine and six-pack done by the back nine. That's a great round of golf. And then you have the other golfer, which are very meticulous, very serious about their game. They will make sure every points are keeping score and every rules and regulations of the games are in place. In Japan, it takes a full day to play 18 hole. In Malaysia, you play during the night. So it's a sport, or it's a sport if you want it to be a sport, but it's also a social activity, is also a business platform. It's a family entertainment. So it's a point of communication. It's a place of entertainment. So yeah, it's around the world. You got plenty of way to do it. And I've been fortunate enough to experience it myself in few places. And but the main purpose, I think, for me is you got like few hours to spend with a couple of people and enjoy it and enjoy your time and enjoy the scenery. And for me, it's more social activities and get some fresh air. That's pretty much what the game of the golf is for me.
All right, I have to go back to this. So in Japan, it takes a full day to play.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
it takes
yeah,
a big
yeah.
chunk of time to play 18 holes in the US, but why is it a full day there or
Because
longer?
full day. Well, first of all, every time I played it when I was in Japan, they pick you up in the morning. It's around 6 something in the morning. By the time you drive to the golf course, so you go through all the traffic and everything, you're already about 2 hours away. So you're arriving over there. It's about 8, and there's a quick breakfast because there's also everything is there's a process. Then you go and play 9 hole, and it takes forever because they tend to look at every angle of the putt and you have one caddies taking care of everything for you. And then comes at the back nine, then there's lunch. Oh my God. So and the lunch took forever. Even being French, you will think I would appreciate a longer lunch, but I'm not normally in the mood for a long lunch when I play golf, especially then it cuts all the momentum. And then you back for the back nine. And then after that, you got the bath and then you got dinner. So by the time you come back, it's 8 o'clock at night. So that's what happened.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. 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 To a
So
point,
it
and
really,
I was nearly refusing to play because if I was stuck in Japan for a weekend, yes, I will go and play. But during the day, no, I don't. No, it's. But bear in mind, in Japan, golf is very. It's fairly exclusive, or less now than it was 10, 15 years ago. But it's also a very expensive place, so you really make an occasion when you go and play. That's pretty much what it is there.
and so is it predominantly like the businessmen who play, or do women play? I'm
It
assuming
used to,
families don't.
yeah, it used to be very much a male business orientated. It has changed a bit, but the thing is the access to the sport in Japan is pretty. It's hard to get access to the sport because first of all, there's not that as courses are not as available as you can find either in Europe or here in USA, but mainly it's still very much a male kind of environment. You have few places where you got ladies who will play, but they will play sometime during the day, certain days, but it's still very much a male environment.
Okay, so let's jump to Indonesia. You say they play at night?
No, that's in Malaysia. Malaysia,
Oh, in
Singapore.
Malaysia.
They got night. What they call what's called night golf. And the reason of night golf because it's so hot during the day, so you play at night, and the golf course are floodlight. It's great. It's a very unique experience. When I was living in Kuala Lumpur, that was one of my favorite things to do. Go and play a 9 or 18 hole after work, and you play. Bear in mind, you are on the equator line, so by 5, 6 o'clock at night, it gets dark anyway. So you can play in 4 hours. You're done. So you got the first probably 6, 7 hole. You still have daylight. So and then the golf course get floodlight, and then you just play where the lights are.
Now, I would imagine that there'd be a lot of par threes and not a lot of par fives if they're trying to light it with
No, no, no,
floodlights.
no, no, no. The full course is lit. This is lit everywhere, and yep, you got to. It's like so the lights are very much a strategic point. So basically, you play where the lights are. So, but you no, yeah. Don't try to cut corners sometimes because then you're done. No, the cut corner is not a solution. You go where the lights are. But the greens are lit in pretty much every direction. The tee box, the fairways. No, it's yeah. It's funny when you fly over like Malaysia, Singapore, places like you can see the golf course lit. Yeah. It's few courses in Malaysia. A bunch of Thailand's got some courses as lit, and that's the reason is because it's so hot during the day. So you can play later in the afternoon and at night. It's very pleasant.
Oh, how fascinating. So if you don't hook it, or you got to
Yeah,
play
well,
straight down the fairway, otherwise you're
no.
losing.
The course are most of the course which are designed for floodlight. They tend not to be as well. No, in fact, even Mission Hill in China, it's a full size course. But the lighting is very good.
That is fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen one in the United States with floodlights on it.
Uh, do I know any course in USA floodlight? I don't know. I don't recall any.
Yeah.
Well, a driving range for sure, but not.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
no, no.
All right. What other, I mean, this is fascinating to me. I didn't even know we were going to go this angle. So you've got Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore that are lit. You've got Japan that, is very exclusive. What other things have struck you in the other countries?
Well, if you look Europe, France is becoming much more a family affair. So it's pretty common now. You got mom and dad and some of the kids who play. It's a lot more. It's a lot more social activity, family entertainment. UK is still very much a male kind of male environment, but it has changed a lot. It used to be very much the kind of a stuffy country club kind of a things, and that has changed a lot over the last 20 years. A lot of the golf courses are now a lot more open to non-members to participate. Pretty much all courses now are open to women. There used to be a time where some courses were males only. That pretty much disappeared these days. Most of them have got pretty good program for junior as well. So the UK has always been fairly at the forefront of trying to find some way to grow the game. Scandinavia, Sweden is the second largest market in Europe, funny enough. Despite having such a short season, but they've got lots of, now bear in mind in summer, they can play 24 hours a day and they never stop. So it's a lot also more social as well. And they have a very good youth program in Sweden. Germany, on the other hand, it's an interesting market because close to 40% of the market in Germany is female. So there's a lot of ladies playing golf in Germany, which is great. So that's a good thing. Spain, you still have a fairly traditional country club kind of approach, but there as well, over the last few years, has been becoming more socialized. And COVID has been, in some ways, if COVID had did some good things, COVID has been great for golf.
Yeah,
COVID
that's
has
true.
been great
Yeah.
for golf because you look, we have so many people participating now into the sport. The reason being is the last 2 years, a lot of places were closed. In fact, at the start of the pandemic, pretty much everything closed. The golf course, most of them were stay open because you can keep some social distance, and lots of people activities they couldn't do now, so we're going to do. And a lot of the kids, junior in USA, have picked up the game of golf over the last 18 months. The reason because their baseball camp 2 years ago were canceled. So they were, am I going to go? My dad's playing golf, or my uncle is playing golf, or my buddies is playing golf, and they go into the attic, find a set of golf club, go to the range, and there was a place for them to escape and to be able to do something. And we have seen it. We have seen a huge amount of new demand and people participating into the game, which is great.
Yeah, that is, because it is such a great social skill. Social game, and it's great for exercise and takes concentration. You have to forget about everything else. It's also frustrating as heck, but we don't.
It's a sport to reveal a lot of yourself in some ways.
It absolutely does.
But there's some great study which just were published by the RNA on how much golf is beneficial to health of people, where everybody was trying to find something positive to do during the pandemic. There's lots of very good research has been done proving that the fact that you're outside, you've got contact with people, even if you're not in direct contact, but the fact that you're able to exchange with people and you get some fresh air, you walk around, and it's also very good for the brain because funny enough, it keeps you, you have to keep thinking during the game. So that's good.
Okay, so if you think about the different ways that people play golf around the world, how does Wilson have to market differently?
Well, you have to consider every market's got the specifications. If I just go very simply, if you look Asia Pacific, just because of mainly the morphology of the golfers, they tend to be a bit shorter. They tend to have a slower swing speed than the 6 foot big quarterback type of guys we have here in USA. So we tend to have golf club. We tend to be a bit lighter in weight, softer with the shaft. Europe also prefer to have something a bit softer in the shaft, where in USA there's a bit of a macho approach sometime in the game, and they want the things and grip it and repeat type of approach. They prefer something a bit more stiffer into their shaft. So we have product specification which varies. We have basically 3 types of specification around the world. You got Europe, who's got one specification, Europe, and then you get Asia. Yeah. So there's some fine tuning into the product. If you look at golf bag, for example, the US market is very cart type of golf bag, so people put on the back of their golf carts. Europe has a more people carry bags, but they also like a lot of the bags in Europe. They want bags which are waterproof, because if it rains, it doesn't stop them to play. Where Asia Pacific, their bags tend to be a lot more decorated. They like lots of embroidery, a bit more shiny material. So that's one thing. Golf glove is another one which is interesting to look at, because the hand morphology around the world is not exactly the same. For example, the guys in Australia tend to have shorter fingers than the rest of the world. So you have gloves which are called cadet sizing, and most of the business in Australia is done with our cadet sizing, where the rest of the world is the regular sizing. And Asia Pacific, they don't use the conventional sizing as we have. They use what's called, it's a centimeter sizing, and it's also slightly different cut, so slightly narrower across the palm, a bit shorter along the finger. So it's the same glove, but there is some nuances depending where the product is shipped.
Fascinating to me. I've never stopped to think about that.
If I look at myself, I'm normally a US regular medium large in my golf glove. When I go in Australia, well, the cadet is a bit short in finger for me, is a bit tight. And if I go in Asia, I have to go between a 22 or 23 size. So yeah, but it's true for everything around the world. You know, having a very unique product which you say it's exactly identical to the same around the world, unless it's a basic commodity. After that, you got a lot of product which are tweaked. You take any big global brand, you can take even the Pepsi-Cola and the Coca-Cola of the world. Their formulations are slightly different around the world. The big McDonald's of the world, their burgers are different tastes around the world. So you even take cars. You know, when I was in Malaysia, my car never had a heater. There's no heater in the car in Malaysia. You can have a BMW. You order a BMW in Malaysia. There's no heater because you never get calls in that country. There's no need to have a heater.
Oh, right. Right. That's funny. It used to be in the United States, there were many cars without air conditioning, but I think they come standard with heat
No,
and
it's pretty
air
much
now.
standard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So with your global marketing, it starts with the product, and then
it starts with the consumer. Pretty much every time, you always start with the consumer. And then from the consumer, you go, yeah, it's a parallel path between what the consumer and what the development R&D are, and those two have to work pretty much together. But if you just do a product purely from an R&D standpoint, at some point in the development, you're going to have to look at what's required for the consumer, especially in product like we do. We have a lot of testing with consumer, testing with the professionals, and because you can have something which on CAD looks great, or you could have you still have the eye of the consumer. It's funny when you have in sporting goods, I see my colleagues in racket sport or in baseball, when you develop a product, you put it down and you look at it, the way it looks to your eyes, and every golfer, especially at the pro level, is like, oh, this is too much angle here, it's a bit curvy here. They all have the toe is too low, or that is too high, or there's too much offset. It's the product is how it feels to the eyes is very important. The golf gloves.
Right, exactly. So yes, I agree with you. Any business starts with the consumer, that you've got to talk to them first and understand what their need is and speak to them in their language. Mm-hmm. And then once you do that, you start developing the product and you're adapting it for the market.
Yeah.
Then, okay, so it starts with the consumer, and then you have the product adaptations. And then when you're going to market, do you have more of a globalized approach, or are you very decentralized, or how is marketing set up in Wilson?
It's a global, for golf is a global approach. If you take like a new golf ball, for example, we will have a global message, because the game at the end of the day, it's the same game around the world. The rules are pretty much the same around the world. So you have at least a common base. And the idea is you got that little white ball and you try to put into the hole in the least amount of stroke. So that's pretty much what the product has supposed to do. But so you have your technology, which it's pretty much global, and then you will adapt a bit your communication message, because if you say a golf ball in certain country, they are more interested in how soft is the ball. In some other part of the world, they will be more interesting is how much distance is the ball. So you have to play some elements. Some elements are more important in some market than some other. The overall message is the same. It's depending how much focus or emphasis you want to put in certain point versus some other.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is I wanted to go to your website and I wanted to compare the kinds of products that you were talking to across. And in the United States, when I type in Wilson Golf, it's recognizing my IP address and giving me English in the US. Now, if I speak Spanish and I'm in the US, I can't get to a Spanish speaking Wilson website.
Correct.
And so I can't find the site that would come up in Mexico.
To be honest with you, I don't think we have a site in Mexico.
Okay.
We have a site for Spain. We have a site for Spain, but that you will have to be that will be from our server out of Europe, because in Europe you can choose your language if you're on the site in Europe.
Oh, so why don't
because
you
we don't
have
the same we don't have all the same products in USA than you have in Europe. So our website are also designed for the market center.
Okay, so
the website is a communication tool today. So I've got product in USA which are not available in Europe, and vice versa. I got product in Europe which are not available in USA. The other things you have is pricing. Some of the pricings are not always the same between Europe and USA. They're very, very similar, but we've got some key retailers around the world that they want to have their own policy. So we don't have we don't have one website with everything in it. No.
Okay. All right. Well, I did find the one in Spain. I went to Wilson Golf Spain and I came up with the Spanish one.
And then Germany has its own Germany's website. There's a French, there's a UK, there's a Swedish. Yeah, there's all those key markets have their own site.
Right. So it gets very complex on something like this because there's lots of people. I mean, the United States has the second largest Spanish speaking population of any country.
But pretty much the communication, if you look at packaging, what we do in packaging, for golf balls are bilingual globally. They are in English and French around the world. So if you are in Spanish, well, you either speak English or you speak French. We don't do the packaging in Spanish. Same for the German. The vast majority of the golfers, they are pretty acquainted with all the kind of language and jargon of the golf industry.
And so
now the local catalogs will be done in local languages, so you can find after that. But the product itself, on golf bags, for example, pretty much all the POPs are done in English and a bit of French, but there's nothing in German, there's nothing in Spanish in those products.
So you were talking about how you gave a number, 40% of the market in Germany is female. And there was one of the countries you gave the number of, no, I know what it was. You said there's 66 million golfers around the world. Did you break that down by what language they speak or what countries they're in?
Yeah, I've got a breakdown. I don't know at the top of my head, but you have to look at close to 40%. The world market is split roughly 40% US, 40% Europe, and there's a 20% Asia. That will be my split for Wilson. Some brand may have a different split. They may have a much bigger business out of Asia Pacific. But for us, is a kind of a 40-40-20.
Okay. All right. So that's where.
But in Europe, you've got all those different countries. They all have those different languages, but with all our communications at the local level, so the reps and even some of the catalogs, some catalogs are not translated into local languages anymore.
That you just keep them in English and
Pretty
French.
much, yeah. Well, the English and French, the French is because of Canada mainly.
Okay. And then how do you set the corporate strategy and then the marketing strategy for the multilingual? Like who controls that in the company, or how?
The product message comes from Chicago at the global marketing level. This is what the story of the product is. Then that is pushed to the local market. So at the global level, Chicago will design this is the main story for that new golf ball. Okay, those are the key features, those are the key benefit. And then the European group will basically take that, and the guys in Germany will adapt that message to their market. Then the French, then the Spanish, then the guys in Sweden and in Norway. So they will all locally transform or adapt some of those languages for their local communication. So when they go and present the product to their customers, they have so in fact, I spent some time a few months ago with a French group on some of the new golf ball product, because there's some words in English, there were some phrases in English they had some problem to translate back into French. So we had to discuss a few things, and sometimes it's pretty tricky, and that's mainly because we relate that back to them, because they are the people who are in the business. They understand the jargon of the industry. We found out that's the only way. It's easier for them to develop their story in their language and be able to communicate it, rather than us trying to force something. We give them a kind of a frame in English, and then they'll adapt from there.
Okay, so they have the framework, but they have a lot of creative flexibility.
They have some flexibility. Yeah, you have some time. You can say something in English, where when it's in French, it means the same, but you have to present it in a slightly different way. And you also go back to what I was saying earlier. In some markets, some features are more important to the consumer than in some other markets. So within all those different features a product may have, you may want to reinforce one more than another, depending where you're presenting the product to.
Yes, it's so interesting to me to talk to people at large companies and look at how their strategies are set up. Like you've really got a multinational one where you create it corporately, but then give each country a lot of discretion on how to do it. And then other countries, it's handled from corporate. And they're making sure that the messages are appropriate, but they're also developing the messages at the start to be culturally appropriate. And then
we're developing the message, then it's corporately appropriate. The feature benefit products are the same. And then just after that is how you interpret that to the point then it's easier for the local market to communicate, or for the consumer to understand that.
Right. So all companies go through miscommunication at some point or another when they're running a global business, because it's inevitable. What mistakes, either that have you run into, or miscommunications?
Well, in fact, I was just mentioning earlier, I spent a bit of time with a French group on the new golf ball we're launching. There's a question of density of the new product. I don't want to enter into too technical here, but that new golf ball we have is the multi-layer constructions, and the density of every layers are the same, which makes the ball balance. And it's not easy to translate to the French, because it was not easy to find the right terminology of how you're going to say, well, every layer basically have the same weight. In the USA, it's presented as weight, and in fact, the real terminology is density. So in USA, we're talking about weight. In Europe, in French, we have to talk about density. So there's a nuance there. But if we say it's just le same poids versus la même densité, physically, it doesn't exactly mean the same. And those are slight nuance and details which we have to come through. I have to say, most of the time, biggest problem we have sometimes, specifically myself, is when I have to deal with my colleagues in Canada, some of their translation in French to me sometimes is like, oh, not exactly right, but it might be right for you in Canada. It's not right for me in French. So I don't know who's right, who's wrong at the end of the day. But it's
Oh,
always a
give
bit.
me an example of what would be difference between the French in Canada and France from what you've seen. I know there's a
Well,
difference because who we assign as
ah,
translators
yeah, well, first
is
of all,
very different.
the Canadian doesn't accept any word of English in their translation. So in French, when you talk golf in French, there's a lot of English word because they took the word, like a wood is a wood, a shaft is a shaft, a putter is a putter. So those words go straight into the copy of the product in French. And for example, a putter in Canadian, c'est un fer droit. Yes, un putter, is not an iron. So they try to find translations, but when you're close enough to the product and close enough to the business, so okay, that's kind of not exactly the right terminology. I understand why they do it because there's not a direct translation, so they're trying to find something. Un putter, and you call it a fer droit. Yeah, well, I know why you call it droit because it's straight, but it's not straight, it's flat. So they call a shaft un bâton. Un bâton for me is a stick. There's a difference between a stick and a shaft, but there's no translation for that. So that's where, when you are technical, close to a product, if you don't have a direct translation, it's hard to find one. The Canadian needs to find translation for everything, so they have to adapt. And yeah, sometimes it sounds kind of strange to me when I read that. Oh, what are you talking here? But there we are.
That's so interesting, right? Because I've heard that in France, as you know, I've heard this from the translators, the email is accepted as email, whereas in
Yeah,
Canada, you can't call it email, you have to call it
un
courrier.
courriel, un courriel.
Yeah,
Yeah, courrier électronique. En fait, it's an abbreviation of courrier électronique, so they call it courriel.
right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
using
yeah,
email would be very
yeah,
offensive, which is the same thing as just
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah, yeah.
use English. Huh.
Well, in fact, l'Académie française right now is raising the flag that it's starting to have too many franglais coming into the language. So that's starting to become an issue for them. Say, hey, be careful here. We're going to create a problem in society where we have people who understand and people who don't understand it. So do we need to start to find some way to regulate it, that how much franglais you can have in your language?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's on the border, in the north border of the United States. And the south border of the United States, you have Mexico, where you have to make sure you use a translator with Mexican Spanish because there's so many English words, or
Yeah,
how
moved in.
Spanish
Yeah.
and English have merged more. So that's accepted there.
It's part of
Isn't
evolution of language. Sometimes it's part of globalization. It's yeah.
yeah.
I hear it. Even funny enough, I hear it with my own here in my own family. My wife being Japanese, sometimes there's some word coming out. This is an English word with an O at the end. So, because they don't have a word in Japanese. So it's like stupid things like if you go to the movie theater, she will get a ticketo. A ticketo is basically the ticket. It's a movie ticket. But they take the English word and they put an O at the end. So it's suddenly starting to sound Japanese. Ticketo. Yeah, well, you got stuff like that.
Different than, like so often we joke around that Spanish is the English word with an O at the end,
Yeah,
but it would be tiqueto. But
yeah,
in Japanese, it's
yeah.
not that is in Spanish. I'm just, playing off the word,
Right, yeah,
but
that's what it is. Yeah, yeah,
tiqueto would be in
yeah.
Japanese. Oh, I never realized that before. That's interesting. Okay. So what do you think the most complicated thing is about global marketing?
That's a tricky question because I guess it's all depends from what angle you're looking at it. For me, I don't think global marketing is complicated because I've only lived in that way. I think global marketing is complicated when you come from a pretty narrow mindset, and I will think it starts from there. Is if you have a pretty wide open mindset, if you are open to ideas and concepts which are not what you used to, it's a lot simpler. But if you want to stick to just what you know and what you want to do, that's where it's becoming complicated. The world is pretty much, if you look at the global level, it's the same wherever you go. For me, I've been in 30 plus countries around the world, and it's like wherever I go, I find the same things. But I'm always looking at such a much higher level, I guess, in some ways. Like people do the same things wherever they wake up every day, they go and try to find some food, they do their work, they go to bed. So for me, it's like wherever we do. After that is adaptation, is and if you can accept people can do things differently, but at the end of the day, they do the same thing. So I don't know if it makes sense, but I can totally understand why people only eat with their hands, because when I was in Malaysia, I love to have my banana leaf lunch and dinner, and you only eat with your hand. And it's never been a problem for me. And when I had a couple of colleagues coming from the USA, they were sitting at those tables and they didn't know what to do. They were missing plate and fork, knife and stuff like that. And I said, well, it's all the same. At the end of the day, all you need to do is to feed your body. You do it with your hand, or you do it with your fork or knife. It's all the same. For me, it's never been a problem. And that's where I think that's where it is. If you are willing to accept and recognize, and there's different ways to solve a problem. And that's what global marketing is you have to look at it and you solve the problem in a different way. And I think the solution is most of the time is already there. You just have to listen and look what's already available in some ways. Don't try to impose anything, just try to adapt.
Okay, so it really is, which is so interesting, is a lot of people think it's starting from from fresh or so different, but so many, like innovation is adapting, and it's
and I'm probably the wrong person to ask the questions, because I never live in just one place. I grew up in northern France. My dad was Belgium, my grandmother was Spanish. I crossed border. I was probably a couple of days old. I was already crossing border. So for me, I'm used to only like 45 minutes drive. When I used to be northern France and I used to go to my grandparents in Belgium, you cross the border, you are in a different country. You go from northern France to South Belgium, it is a different country. They have different culture, they have different cooking. Even if they speak French, and with Belgium French, it's not the same. They don't eat always the same things. They have different rites and they have different celebrations. And for me, it's always been something which I'm starting to realizing more and more as I'm getting older, and then how much was is so much part of myself. And I say it's global, is part of myself. It's never been for me like, oh, it's something different. It's just with the way they are. It's like, as I say, my wife is Japanese, and the Japanese have all sorts of different cultures and all sorts of, but it's never been a problem for me. I'm just like, okay, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. I don't have a problem with it. I think if you want to be a global marketer, you have to be very open-minded. You have to accept, okay, that's the way people are doing it. Don't try to force something, just try to adapt something.
So you've been in, I don't even know how to, what I want to ask is, which culture have you been in that's most different from you? Yet you've been in the United States for years, right?
Yeah.
How many years have you been here?
More of, over 20 years now.
20 plus years, and you grew up in Europe. So which culture do you think has been the most different?
The most different. The most different from all is Japan. That's for sure. My family in Japan is by far the most different, because of the language. You can't read anything. You try to take a train in Tokyo, good luck. You can't read anything. It's just such a different culture. But even is that different, I never feel being a foreigner, funny enough. I don't feel I'm out of place. Okay, fine, that's the way they are. I just keep going. Now you can feel lost sometimes, that's for sure. So, I'm not too sure where I'm going here or what they're putting on the table, but that's fine. China sometimes could be pretty. Okay, that could be some part of China where you really. I think the place where I felt the most foreign was 20 years ago. I was in Shanghai one Sunday. I was walking in the street, and every single kid were turning their eyes and looking at me. It was just like,
Because you look so different.
it was, who is this guy? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, my mom did a, Fulbright scholarship about 15 years ago in China, and I went over to visit her with some friends, and we ended up in a small town, and we were at the village square when they were having their market, and there was a young boy. He must have been around 10. And his family was like, oh, he speaks English. So we stopped to speak to him, and he could count to 10. He could say, how are you? And the crowd gathered around us to watch him doing that. And I gave him my business card and I said, here, if you ever come to the United States. But it was very interesting because in the United States, if that interaction had happened, a crowd wouldn't have gathered around
No.
to watch what was going on. Even in a small town, you'd be trying to avert your eyes and show that you weren't watching. So there's little things that, I was very honored, and I enjoyed the situation, and the boy was very engaging because he was willing to try English, and so it was fun. It was just different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know. You say, even when I went to Africa a few times, I never felt that. I always feel wherever I go around the world, I always feel that there's a certain zone of comfort wherever I go. But I'm happy to eat in the street in Bangkok, and I'm happy to eat in a premium restaurant in USA. I'm fine with both locations, so that doesn't bother me. In fact, when I used to cover the Asia Pacific market, every country I was, whether Vietnam or Indonesia or Thailand or whatever, Myanmar, every time I go at the factories, I could say, well, let's just go and eat somewhere in the street. I just go there. It's never been a problem for me because I want to enjoy the local. I'm not going to come all the way in another part of the world just to have the same taste, flavor of food or experience than I have if I'm staying at home or I've been there somewhere before.
So what's been some of your favorite foods that you've had from around the world?
Oh, I'm a big fan of the food in Singapore. Singapore for me is one of the places for me where I enjoy the most because you got all the Indian food, you got Chinese food, you got Thai, you got so many different flavor, and you can mismatch so many things. That's I have to say a good curry in Singapore, a fish head curry in Singapore, or drunken prawns or paper crab on the fish market along the ocean over there. It's a pretty good thing. It only costs you $10, but it's pretty damn good.
Really? I know it. See, I haven't been to Singapore, and I've heard it's a very
Singapore.
expensive city, but you're
No,
saying the
no, no,
food
no, no,
is
no. Singapore. Well, Singapore is expensive. It depends where you go and where you stay. But there's lots of what they call the hawker food center. You go get some satay or stuff like that. It's great. Indonesia's got some good food as well.
Yeah, we got to get our traveling hats back on. Or
Yeah. No, it's painful for me. I used to go around the world about 6-7 times a year, not to be able to go out in a plane these days.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So traveling that much, must have a very memorable cultural experience that's funny or scary or just memorable. Yeah.
One of which will stick in mind for many years is we were in China, but you go back a long time ago in China, probably 20 plus years back in China. I was working trying to work with a new factory, trying to find some source, and I'm with one of my colleagues from Singapore, and we are stuck there, and in that small airport, we are going to take a domestic flight to Beijing from that small town wherever I was, close to Sherman or Shenzhen at the time. And nothing's happened in the airport, and suddenly we see all the crowd moving in another part of the airport. So, okay, well, it looks like we need to change gate, and they're starting to give us a food. I say, oh, that's a bad sign. And we were still there, and no sign of things. And my colleague from Singapore finally get information that the plane has been canceled. I thought, oh, that's no good. Cut the story short, a few hours later, the 747 plane was landed there, and that plane was coming and pick us up. So, well, that's pretty damn. Putting a 747 as the old 747 at the day. So, how can you get in there? We had to go on the tarmac, and I always remember seeing that at 74. We are here in the tarmac. the door of the plane is open. The stewardess is just looking at us there, and there's that big space. And those Chinese people find a bamboo ladder somewhere along the airport because they were expanding the airport. They were doing some paint work. They put the bamboo ladder along the plane. They were trying to climb the bamboo ladder. I was like, I said, what the heck is going on here? And I'm there with my colleague Doreen C from Singapore. I said, what's going on there? They finally brought a jetway to get us into the plane. So I was just like, oh, that's like going inside the plane in a bamboo ladder 747. That was going to be epic.
Oh my,
Yeah.
she must have such a mental picture of that, of just
the
conflict of the old
well,
bamboo
and
ladder.
the trip goes even further. So now I'm in the plane, and the plane is nearly full. What the heck's going on in this plane? But it's those days of China, 20 plus years ago. They used to do whatever they want. They still do that. But so I'm sitting and I take a seat there, and I'm someone next to me, and I look at the person and say, where are you from? So we're from New York. I say, what? So yeah, the plane was diverted from New York to come and pick you up, guys. I say, what? They divert the plane as soon as the plane was basically in the domestic airline, domestic air of China. They divert the plane to come and pick us up because we were going to Beijing. So now we are in that plane. There's like a couple hundred more than that people from. So they're all mad because they've been delayed by a few hours as well. And when I arrive in Beijing, now that's another funny part. I arrive in Beijing, and as soon as the doors open, there's the military people came inside the plane, and they make some announcement. The American people need to stay on the board. Only domestic people come out first, because if you think about it, you mixed up a domestic flight with an international flight, right? So I'm standing up because I'm on the domestic flight. I've got the domestic flight, and the guy comes out at me and put a kind of a little machine gun at me. He said, no, you can't get out. And so, but Doris said he doesn't want you to get out. I said, well, I'm the domestic flight. Here's my air ticket. He had a hard time to understand, and I was not coming from New York. So what? Couldn't understand. Why would I want to come from that little town in the middle of nowhere in China? But yeah, it took a bit of time and discussion with the air crew, and they let me out. Yeah, there we are.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So it all
Yeah.
works out in the end, but you
Oh, it
stay
works out
curious
fine.
and
Yeah,
open.
yeah.
Eventually it does.
It eventually does. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know this question's coming, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say. What's your favorite foreign word?
My foreign in which language?
As I told somebody earlier, foreign word is loosely given. It can be any language, and word can be a phrase too. So I am open.
There's one language I learned very quickly when I with my kids is Japanese. Is muto tekeki tabetai. Muko keki tabetai means I want more cake. So and I think it's pretty easy to translate, because muto is mucho as well in Spanish, keiki, cake. So it was easy for me to learn that one in Japanese. So that was one of the first few Japanese words I learned, is to get more cake. So there we are.
Okay, so say it again slower. Muto kaki.
Muto keki tabetai.
But to buy
which is can I please have more cake? Or est-ce que je peux avoir un peu plus de gâteau? Which is also in French, because cake, gâteau, keiki. It was pretty easy for me to understand that, to get that one. Yes, yeah.
What language do you speak?
The main language at home is English. Then there is a communication line between my daughter and my wife in Japanese. So in some way, they can keep me away from the conversation a bit. My boy and I, it's pretty much English. And sometimes we got some French coming into it as well, but English will be the main language.
And then have your kids learned French and Japanese, or
my kids are fluent in Japanese, because when I'm not in the house, and I used to be away a lot, so my wife was only talking to them in Japanese. So there we are.
Oh, good for them. Okay.
Yeah. They got some French as well, because not the last couple of years, but the last few summer, we used to go in France, and they were attending class in a school in France over there, because we finished so early in USA. We finished in June, but the French doesn't finish until basically mid-July or early July. So they had a month. They could just go to the local school and interact with the kids over there and learn the language at the same time and make some friends over there.
Oh boy, what a gift to speak English, French, and Japanese. They'll be in global business or
Well,
global something.
yeah, I don't know. No, so the other thing is the gift of citizenship as well. That's an important one, I guess.
And so what citizenship do they have? They were born here. So US.
The US, yeah, they got Japanese and French. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right. We're running out of time here. What recommendations would you have for people in doing global business?
I go back to what I said earlier. I think is you need to go with a very open mind. Just keep listen, very much listen, because a lot of the time the solution will be given to you. Sometimes you don't have to look. They will tell you what the solutions are for what to address, what needs to be done in the market. And if it's not the way you want it to be done, that doesn't mean it's the wrong way. As I said, there's different solution to the problem. You can have people who do certain things in certain ways, and some people will do it differently. At the end of the day, if you are keeping everybody in a kind of a happy mode and deliver them the product to service them well, I think you are normally in a pretty good shape. But don't try to force things in. Let the market come to you and work with them. I think that's been and I see it in relationship. It's very true. These days, we haven't been able to work a lot directly with people because of COVID and pandemic. But the fact when you have a relationship with people for so long and you've been working with so long, because you understand what they do, you have a respect for what they do, and it helps a lot, especially when you're not able to go and visit them at the moment. Business wise, has been a big benefit to be able to work with. Okay, well, you tell us what works for you, how we can make it happen, and respect what they have to say and try to find a solution.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yes, and I think that I know the pandemic's been hard for a lot of people, but I think it had teach us one thing, is the human contact is still, hopefully, will come back as soon as you can, because not being able to visit people, work in factories and go to the floor and do stuff like that, it's getting painful.
Right.
It is painful. Right.
All right. Where can people reach you if they want to learn more, or connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so that's easy to find me there on LinkedIn. I'm also,
why don't you go ahead and spell your name so people can find you on LinkedIn, and it'll be in the show notes too.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Dejambe, so JeanPierre Degembe.
Okay. Thank you very much. This has really been a fascinating conversation for me, because I am a golfer and I've never thought about the different golfing from around the world. So getting into that and then learning more about how you do your global marketing is fantastic. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
It was a pleasure, Wendy. Thank you very much.
And for listeners, if you know a golfer, certainly pass this along to them, to share this episode, because I'm sure they'd get a real kick out of learning about the different golfing international. And if you ever have comments that you want to share with other listeners, there's a Facebook group called Global Marketing and Growth, where we're very active in posting in there and engaging. So if you've got comments about this, you head over to the Facebook group Global Marketing and Growth, ask to join, and then you can participate in the conversation. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time. That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.